Pranam, Jai Jirendra. Welcome to today's class on Introduction to Jainism. We'll change the format slightly today, but we may not have much time for questions and answers. But at the end, I've got a couple of about four subjects for people to think about, ponder, maybe find some answers to. And we will start next week's class with the discussions on those questions. And today also we'll start the class with Sheila reciting a couple of verses from the Sajai, the link to which was sent to all of you by Sandipai yesterday. So this is the Metaraj Muni Sajai, and Sheila had kindly agreed that she would sing it for us. I'm hoping that Sheila, you're ready. So let's start with the Pratna. I'll share my slides now. Kavit Mira, when I finish and I say it, then maybe Sheila can take over for a couple of slides. We'll start with the prayer as usual. Namo Orientanam, Namo Siddhanam, Namo Ayariyanam, Namo Vajjayanam, Namo Loe Sabba Sahunam, Eso Panchanamukaro Sabba Pavapanasano, Manglanancha Sabbe Simparmam Havai Mangalam. Namo Orientanam, Namo Siddhanam, Namo Ayariyanam, Namo Vajjayanam, Namo Loe Sabba Sahunam, Eso Panchanamukaro Sabba Pavapanasano Manglanancha Sabbe Simparmam Havai Mangalam. Namo Arihantanam, Namo Siddhanam, Namo Ayariyanam, Namo Uvajjayanam, Namo Loe Sabba Sahunam, Eso Panchanamukaro Sabba Pavapanasano Manglanancha Sabbe Simparmam Havai Mangalam. Veera Sarvasura Surendra Mahito Vinubida Sansrita Virena Bhiyata Swakarmani Chayo Veeraya Nityam Nama Veera Tirthamidam Pravadamatalam Veera Shughoram Tapo Veera Sri Truti Kirtikanti Nichaya Sri Veerabhadram Disa Anguthe Amrutavase Lapti Tana Bandar Sri Guru Gautam Samariye Manavanchita Fadadatar. Just a reminder, as always, what we are here to do. I'll recite the Bharesar Sajjai now, and then we can ask Sheila to take over just for a few verses. Okay. Bharhe Sarabahubali Avai Kumaro Dandran Kumaro Sirio Ani Autto Imutto Nagadato Me Jathuli Baddo Vairisi Nandi Sena Sihagiri Kaivanno Asukosala Pundario Kesi Karakandu Halla Vihala Sudansana Sala Mahasala Sali Baddoha Sali Baddo Dasana Baddo Sali Baddo Baddo Dasana Baddo Pasana Chando Ajasa Baddo Jambu Pahu Vankachulo Gai Sukumalo Avanti Sukumalo Dano Ilai Putto Chilai Putto Abahu Muni Ajgiri Ajrakhia Aj Suhati Udayago Monago Kalaya Suri Sambo Pajuno Muladevo Pavo Vinu Kumaro Ad Kumaro That Pahari Sijans Kurugaddu Sirimbo Meh Kumaro Emai Mahasata Dintu Suham Gungane Him Sanjuta Jesim Nam Gahane Pav Bunda Vilayam Janti Sulasa Chandana Bada Mayo Manorama Mayanare Hadamiyanti Namya Sundri Siya Nanda Badda Subadaya Raimai Risidatta Paumavai Anjana Siri Devi Jitta Sujita Migavai Papavai Chilana Devi Bambi Sundari Rupini Revai Kunti Siva Jayantiya Devai Dovai Dharani Kalavai Puffachulaya Paumavai Gori Gandhari Lakhamana Susimaya Jambuvai Sachibama Rupini Kanhatha Mahisiyo Chakaya Chakadina Bhua Taha Chev Bhua Tinnaya Sina Vena Rena Bainio Sthuli Baddasa Ichai Mahasayo Jayanti Akalanka Sila Kaliyao Ajvi Vajjai Jasim Jaspadhoti Hone Sayale. Okay. Now, Shilaben, if you're ready,
Yeah.
then if you can just recite maybe 2-3 verses. I'm just going to shorten it a bit for you, but maybe we can have time to complete the whole sajai in your voice next week. But I've sent the link and I am hoping that people have had time to listen to it. Thank you very much for agreeing, Shilaben. Go ahead.
Is it the same one, Shamdam Gurna? Is that the one?
May not be, but whatever it is, I mean, I've sent the link.
Okay, because I don't know if I've received it or not, but I've prepared this one, so I'll just sing
Don't
that.
worry, whatever you prepared.
Okay. Shamadam Gulna Agaruji Panch Mahavratadhar मास खमळने पारले जी राजग्रही नगरी मोजा मेतार जमुनिवर धन्य धन्य तुम अवतार सोनी ने गिरा जी मेतार ऋषिराज चवला घड़तो उठियो जी वंदे मुनिना पाय में तारज मुनिवर धन्य धन्य तुम अवतार आज पड्यो घर आंगणो जी विणकाले सहकार ल्यो भिक्षाची सुजती जी मोदक तळाए आहार मेतार जमुनिवर धन्य धन्य तुम अवतार क्रोंच जीव जवला चण्याजी गोहरी वळ्या मुनिता सोनी ने मन शंका थई जी साधु तना एकाम में तारज मुनिवर धन्य धन्य तुम अवतार धन्य धन्य तुम अवतार. Is that enough? Yeah.
Place there, and I know there are a few other verses after that, but let's hold on there, and maybe I might ask you to carry on and finish the rest today, or we will take the whole sajai again next week. But if those of you who have listened to the version that I've sent you, if you have any comments, then please say so later on. Okay. So again, my slides. Okay, can you see the slides?
You'll need to start sharing again.
Sorry, Mira, can you?
You'll need to start sharing again.
Can you see this slide 9?
No.
No.
You'll
Okay.
have to. Can
I
you
think I'll go to reshare it.
reshare?
Right?
Please, thanks.
Okay, good. So again, just reminder, the same slides as we've been seeing. What is a sajai? So we've so far had 9 classes on this. We finished number 9, Sri Nagdat, number 2 last week. Okay. Now, there are several parts to this story. What we are going to talk about in the beginning, and all these stories will be recited briefly, and I'm hoping that I can take you on a journey that gives you the gist and the depth of these stories. But even though it is brief, there is a lot to learn from this particular story of Mitarya Muni. Now, the story that's recited in the Sajjai just relates to this one incident, and that is the most commonly known incident. The rest of the story of Mitarya Muni's life prior to him becoming a monk, and his life, his previous life that led to, that is connected to what happened in this life, particularly the incident around his birth and subsequent life before he becomes a monk, is all something which is very interesting, and we will discuss that as well. Now, Mitarya Muni had become a monk at a fairly young age, having given up his household and his life as quite a rich and well-to-do person with 8 wives that he had spent many years with them. But as he had decided a long ago that he would become a monk after about 12 years of his marriage, he does give up all his worldly life and becomes a monk. And very soon after him getting the necessary experience and the qualifications, he starts going from place to place on his own. The word that's used is that he becomes a Jin Kalp Muni. And one day, at the end of a month-long fast, as Sheila Ben is recited in the Sajjai, that Mas Khamanne Parane, meaning he had been fasting for a month, and he goes into the town to seek a bhiksha, alms, so that he can break his fast. And he comes to the house of this jeweler, this Soni, who on this day is particularly making, as was his usual practice, for a certain time of his day, he would be making golden rice grains for the king, who used these grains in his puja of Tirthankar Paramatma on a daily basis. So the jeweler Soni was busy doing this in the porch of his house, as you can see in this picture. And Mitarya Muni stops at his house to seek alms, and the Soni is devoted, and he knows what Muni would be able to eat and accept. So he's very grateful that Muni has come, and he decides to give him some alms. As you can see in the picture, there is a bird sitting on the tree just at the top of on the left side of Mitaraj Muni. The Soni is holding his hands up in a posture of bowing down to the Muni. And in the next slide, you can see that the Muni is standing. The jeweler, the Soni, has gone inside to seek or fetch the food to give to Metari Muni. And in this time, while the Soni has gone inside, the bird sees an opportunity because he's been eyeing these grains and not knowing that they are made of gold, but he feels that this is a meal that is waiting for him. And as soon as the Soni goes inside, the bird flies down and gobbles up all those rice grains, which he thinks are rice, but actually they are made of gold. So they're not really suitable for him, but the bird doesn't know, but he swallows them all. The jeweler, the Soni, comes back and pours the food that is brought from inside the house for the Muni. So the Muni can take it and break his fast. And Metari Muni, as you can see here, is receiving the food, and the Soni, the jeweler, very calmly and peacefully and generously giving away all that food for Metaraj Muni. And the bird, as you can see, is back on that branch of this tree.
Ajit Bhai, can
Yeah.
you just play the slideshow so then we can see it? It's if you maximize the screen.
How do I do that?
You just go from current slide. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, let's start with this. So what do from
Yeah, just from there. Click
from
on that.
current slide, and so I say, how do I maximize the
If you just click from current slide.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine.
That's better.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Now I've copied this from the story that's depicted on one of the Jain sites, and the images are small, and I've sort of extended them so they may not be as clear as one would hope, but here goes. Okay. So as you can see, I mean, it's not very clear that the bird is down here, but the bird is not on the branch there. So the story in this slide is that the bird has flown down and is gobbling up the rice grains. And here the Soni is pouring the food in the patra of Metari Muni, and the bird is back on the branch where you can see. Now, soon after that, the Metari Muni goes back to away from the Soni's house to a place where he would sit down and have his food and then go back to meditation. But we can see here that the Soni, the jeweler, is running after Metari Muni, because as soon as Metari Muni has gone and he gets back to his work, he cannot see those golden grains that he's been preparing for the king, and they've all disappeared. And his first thought is that they must have been taken by the Muni, who is obviously, he convinces himself that there is nobody else here and only the Muni would have taken them. So he's the thief. And he rises up and runs after Metaraj Muni. By the time he catches up with him, Metari Muni has already finished the food and is standing back in meditation not far from the Soni's house. And Soni then talks to him, beseeches him that please return my golden jawla, because I'm sure you've taken them. And he becomes quite abusive to the Muni. The Muni is in meditation, and he is obviously not going to open his mouth, because he knows that as soon as if he does tell the Soni what has happened, then the Soni will surely seek out the bird and try and kill him to get his golden rice grains. So Metaraj Muni decides to keep silent in kindness, and uh, with the knowledge that the bird has eaten those grains, and in kindness to the bird to ensure that his life is preserved, Metaraj Muni remains completely silent, no matter what would happen to him. The Soni, meanwhile, not getting an answer from Metarya Muni, decides to punish him, because he is extremely angry and he's lost all sense of proportion, and he was obviously very, very attached to this, and it's probably a big loss to him, but he cannot think of any alternative explanation except that the Muni must have taken it. And he keeps on asking him, where have you hidden it? Where is it? Give it to me. But Metarya Muni remains silent. So what the Soni does is he gets a piece of leather, a strip of leather, which he then wets in water and ties it around to Metarya Muni's head. Now, this piece of leather, when it is tied down and Metarya Muni is standing in on a hot day out in the sun, the water from the strip would evaporate, and the strip, which has expanded because of the wetness and has been stretched, now starts contracting. Now, as the strip contracts, and he's tied it very tightly around Metarya Muni's head, as you can see, and as it contracts, it squeezes Metarya Muni's head, skull, and it goes on to an extent that it actually crushes his skull. And while this is going on, Metarya Muni is deep in meditation. He is completely ignoring the pain that one can imagine he must have been feeling, with the very clear understanding that he will not sacrifice the bird's life and open his mouth, and he is not upset with the Soni either. He does not have any sense of enmity or any anger towards the jeweler, the Soni, and in his mind, he's doing the only thing that is possible for a monk with a vow of ahimsa. And while he's steadfast in this resolve, he is spiritually climbing up very, very fast. He's getting rid of all his karmas. And by the time his skull fractures, crashes completely, and he dies, he's already achieved Keval Gnan, and within a short time after that, his soul has got rid of all the karmas and goes straight to moksha. So the body is now dead. Metaraj Muni's soul has departed to moksha, has achieved nirvana, having achieved Keval Gnan just a few moments before that. and his body falls down. This particular version of the story is saying that as Metaraj Muni's body falls down, the sound of that and the suddenness of a person just dropping down dead startles the bird, and he opens his bowels, and the golden rice grains fall on the ground, and the Soni immediately sees those and understands. So in this picture, what you can see is something yellow down here, and the Soni is sitting in the tree here. Metaraj Muni has dropped down, the bird gets startled, and he loses the contents of his bowels, and the rice grains, the golden rice grains, are down there. And the Soni sees that, and he suddenly realizes what a grave mistake he has made. And as a result of his action, a great Muni has lost his life, and he is extremely repentant. But he also knows that Metarya Muni is the son-in-law of King Shranik. And he is obviously an ascetic, he is a Jain monk. He is very much regretful of this whole incident, and he decides that there is no recourse to him returning back to his former life, and the only way he can make amends and also to escape the king's wrath. He can't see any other escape except to become a monk himself. And not only himself, him and all his family members all take Diksha and become monks and nuns. The king, having been given the information and the news that Metarya Muni has collapsed and died, and the circumstances around that, sends his men around to search for the Soni and capture him. But as his men find that the Soni, the jeweler, is now in the garb of a Muni, and they, as per the king's instruction, would not touch him. And they come back and inform the king that this is what's happened. And the king then says that he has run away and taken on the dress of a monk. If he comes back to Sansar, if he leaves this, because the king wants to ensure that he does not leave this life, if he comes back and carries on with his life, then he is surely going to be captured and killed or hanged, because that is the law. But now that he is a Muni, I will not touch him. But if he does not carry on with that life, then he will not be allowed to live. So the Soni and his family then decide and go to Bhagwan Mahavir and become monks and nuns in the proper way. And this particular version of this story says, I mean, there may be a different version there, that they then all follow a very good ascetic life, and they all also achieve Keval Gnan and Nirvana. So the whole city becomes extremely upset, and the news spreads like wildfire that this Soni has killed Muni. And as I just said, the Soni, in his fright and his instinct to preserve his life, becomes a Muni. And the king says, if any of you, meaning the Soni and his family, give up your monkhood or nunhood, then you will all have, you'll lose your life. And the words that are used here, કે તેઓએ પ્રભુ પાસે જઈ દીક્ષા લીધી અને સૌ મોક્ષમાં ગયા. So they, in that life, even though he had gone this far as to kill a monk, it says that he got rid of his karmas and went to moksha. Now, let's go a bit deeper into who really was Metarya before he became a monk. As I hinted to the story last week, Metarya, as far as the world knew, was the son of a very rich merchant in the city of Rajguri. At the time of Shrenik Raja and Bhagwan Mahavir, Rajguri was the capital city of Magad, the country of Magad. Now, I explained also what the word Metarya means and why he was named like that. Metarya's, the mother who gave him birth was a cleaner, and she used to regularly come to this Seth's house and to deliver some milk and maybe dahi. And the the Seth's wife and this Metaraj's mother, the cleaner, became very good friends, and they were exchanging their particular problems like very close friends. And the Seth's wife was quite distressed by the fact that every time she became pregnant, all the children who were born to her were born dead. And now there is another part to this story here, which says that this Chandali, or the cleaner, was working at this merchant's house, and she and the merchant's wife were all both pregnant at the same time. And the merchant's wife had felt that she wanted to eat some meat while she was pregnant, and this cleaner then fulfills that particular wish, because that was thought to be the effect of the pregnancy or the child that was unborn. And every child that was born to this merchant's wife died. And the word that is used is that she was Mrut Vatsa, meaning that every child, every pregnancy ended in a stillbirth. The merchant's wife was very unhappy, but the two of them, while they're talking, the cleaner's wife, the cleaner, very generously says that I have no trouble in getting pregnant, and I have no difficulty in giving birth to a live child. So why don't I give you the baby that is born to me, and let's agree that more or less we will be delivering the babies at about the same time. And the two of them make a pact and arrange it with very close friends that when this happens, neither of their husbands or anybody else in the community is aware that they both given birth to a baby around the same time, and the two babies are exchanged. And Metarya then becomes the son of this great merchant and his wife, and the cleaner, the Chandal, is fine with that. And for many years, as Metarya is growing up, these two dear friends, ladies, keep the secret with themselves. Now, when he was about 16 years old, his parents decide that it was time for him to get married, and they seek out 8 beautiful brides from the very rich families in the city, including a princess, the daughter of King Shrenik. And they all agree because the merchant was very prominent and was extremely wealthy, and he was from a high class of society. So everybody agrees to marry their daughter to Metarya. Prior to this particular arrangement and the wedding procession, Metarya had been visited by a Dev who was a friend of his from previous life, and they were both in Devlok together, and they had made a pact that whoever becomes a human being in the next life first, the other, meaning the Dev, would come down and, similar to the other story that we had heard, and encourage them and persuade them to become a monk, because that was the best purpose that a human birth or a human life should follow. So the Dev comes down and talks to Metarya and says that you must become a monk. And Metarya is not very keen. He still wants to enjoy the worldly pleasures, and he ignores the Dev's, his friend's advice. Because they made this pact, the Dev was completely determined to ensure that Metarya actually became a monk. So on the day of this wedding procession, in this particular uh, version of the story that I suggested to you to read last time, the one written by Jai Bhikkhu, he very beautifully describes this wedding procession and exactly what happens then. The Dev enters the body of Metarya's actual father and makes him aware that this beautiful rich person who is getting married to these 8 beautiful wives is actually his son, and that he was given away at birth to the wife of this particular Seth, and he encourages him because he's taken hold of his body and he does not have control of what he's doing. And he makes an announcement while the wedding procession is going on that this person is not actually the son of the rich merchant, and he's not of the high class in society that is being depicted. He's actually my son, and I'm the cleaner, I'm a Chandal. So as soon as people hear this, the 8 girls who had agreed to marry him and their parents and the king as well and the queen, they all decide that this is not a suitable groom for their daughters and stop the wedding procession and take their girls back home and saying that you cheated us, you not told us that this was the case. Obviously, until now, nobody except the 2 mothers knew what the story behind his Metaria's birth was. And as soon as this information becomes public knowledge, the wedding is called off, and Metaria is obviously dejected. His friend comes down and again tells him to become a monk. And Metaria says, I appreciate what you've done. You are trying to push me in this direction of becoming a monk. But in so doing and in the way that you've done this, I agree with you that I need to become a monk as we had agreed in our previous life as devs. And I will do that. But now you humiliated me in front of everybody, and the prominence with which my family is held, you now moved us down to a very low level. And I want you to do something to ensure that I get married with these 8 girls again to regain my status in society. And after I have spent 12 years as a householder leading that kind of life, I will become a monk. So his friend agrees. He says, okay, I'll give you 12 years. And what he does, this is the way the story is explained, that he produces or he gives him a special goat, which on a daily basis, when the goat is at Metaria's house, passes out with her feces valuable ratnas, and this is all the devs doing, and that they have the power to do these kinds of things. And the Metaria's father, the great Seth, puts them in a tray on a daily basis and takes them to the king as a gift. And he does this repeatedly until the king is quite surprised that he is getting extremely valuable jewels on a daily basis from Metaria, and where is he getting them from? So he then asks Abhay Kumar, who is his chief minister, to investigate. And Abhay Kumar goes to investigate and finds that these jewels are being defecated by this goat on a daily basis. And he obviously realizes that this is the doing of a dev. And if he is helping Metaria, then Metaria is obviously a very fortunate, a very punyashali Atma, and he needs to be helped. So Abhay Kumar then says, okay, I need to take this goat back to the king. So he takes the goat back to the king, but as soon as the king, the goat enters the palace, this daily secretion of defecation of jewels stops, and all that the goat is defecating is feces. And the king is convinced that this is not going to work, so he sends the goat back, and then again the flow of jewels starts again. And then Abhay Kumar realizes that this ploy is to persuade the king, to convince him that Metaria is a suitable groom for his daughter. And ultimately, with Abhay Kumar's help, the king finally agrees. And there is a lot of discussion and debate about low birth and high birth. And Abhay Kumar is obviously extremely knowledgeable and knows the norms, but also understands the wider context of all this and persuades the king by saying that Metarya is obviously of high birth by virtue of his sanskar and the upbringing that he has had, and this idea about low birth and high birth uh, originated for certain social reasons, and it's not really true, and he really is a suitable groom for your daughter. So as soon as the king agrees and marries his daughter, the princess, with Metarya Muni, all the other 7 girls' parents then decide that now that Metarya has married the princess and the king has agreed, then there is no harm in us also giving away our daughters to Metarya. And then Metarya becomes a householder and lives like that for 12 years and then becomes a monk. And that's the story that we heard. Now, who was his friend, the Dev, and what was their life before that, that they had acquired so much punya that they had both become Devs? And why is it that Metarya had to suffer this particular humiliation, that having been born in low caste, spent his life in a higher caste family, had all the trappings of uh, birth in a very rich and family with lots of influence and prestige? What is it that he had done in his previous life? And very briefly, I will tell you the story of his previous life. Again, that story is also quite complicated. And again, there are 2-3 different parts to this story. In brief, Metarya Muni, in his previous life, was the son of a Purohit, that is the chief priest of a king, and his name was Sut Yug. And his friend was the prince of that particular city-state of Ujjaini, and his name was Saustik. Now, Saustik's father was the king Munichandra. The story behind who was Munichandra is also quite complicated, but Munichandra's brother had become a monk. His brother was the king, and his name was Sagar Chandra. Sagar Chandra, as a result of some incidents that happened in his life after he had become king, and his desire to wanting to become a monk soon after his father had become a monk and died. Sagar Chandra wanted to become a monk, but the desire had to be curtailed because of circumstances. And then something else happened, and he decided that he didn't want to carry on holding on to the kingdom, and he became a monk. and became very, very knowledgeable. And his knowledge went up to Agyar Ang, meaning it's all just a step down from where a Ganadhar Bhagwan's knowledge would be. And once he got the message that in the city of Ujjaini, the king's son and his friend, that is the Saustik and Sutyug, that was the life of the Dev who came to aid of Metarya, and Metarya's life, his soul, in this life by the name of Sutyug, were making life very difficult for monks, and they were teasing them and making fun of them and creating all kinds of difficulties. And people were fed up of that, and particularly monks and nuns found it very difficult to survive in that city. And Ujjaini was a prominent city. So he decides to go and teach them a lesson. Now, Sagar Chandra the Muni goes to Ujjaini, which is being ruled by Muni Chandra, who was his brother, because Muni Chandra was the son of the same father and mother. Sagar Chandra had inherited his dad's kingdom, and Muni Chandra had been given this kingdom of Ujjaini. When he enters the city and goes to the palace, these two youngsters see the monk and decide that they want to play with the monk and make mischief. So that they tell him that, would you play with us and would you actually have fun with us? But their intention was to make life difficult for the monk. So the monk agrees, and in the process of the play, he very quickly disables these two youngsters, Swastik and Sutyug, and makes them almost completely paralyzed. None of their limbs work, and he has used a certain technique that he was familiar with to almost paralyze them. And he leaves them in that situation and goes out of the town and stands in meditation. This message obviously reaches the king, and he is extremely distressed, and he understands what has happened, and he goes to the monk and says, look, I'm very distressed about the situation with my son and the Purohit's son. Can you please make them back to normal so they can live a proper life, because they will not be able to do anything in the situation they're in now. So Sagar Chandra Muni says that I can do that only on one condition. They have been teasing Munis for a long time, and you as a king have not actually done anything. And you've not stopped your son, the prince, and his friend. And the only way I will release them from this paralysis is if they both agree to become monks as well. And ultimately, as there was no alternative and it was not something that was acceptable to the two boys or to their parents, they agreed that yes, as soon as they are back to normal, they will become monks. And Sagar Chandra Muni then reverses the process that he had done to paralyze them, and they become righted, and they both become monks. They learn what they need to, they become good monks, and they live a very good life. But Sutyug, that was the soul of Metarya Muni, was the son of a Brahmin, and he found the vows of Jain monks very difficult because, as some of you would know, Brahmins are very particular about cleanliness, and they would bathe many times, particularly in those days, many times a day, and ensure that their body was clean. And Jain monks do not bathe at all. So this Purohit's son, Metarya's previous life, Sutyug, has spent his life as a monk, but with this particular feeling in his mind that he was not leading a clean life in that sense. So he was particularly exercised about the fact that his body remained unclean in his pursuit of these vows. So he had a bit of dislike for that particular aspect of a Muni's life. And as a result of that, he acquired bad karmas that resulted in him being born in a Meth's family. And because of his other good karmas, that particular problem did not disable him and still gave him a long life. But obviously, he had to face this humiliation at his wedding procession. So that was Metarya Muni's previous life. And then when both friends, having spent their life as monks, end that life, they both go to Devlok and they are both friends there as well. And they make this pact that is then fulfilled by the Dev, and you just heard what happens afterwards. Okay. Now, I know we are past our time. I just wanted you to contemplate on these 4 questions. We briefly discussed the acquisition of karmas and the effects they produce. And in this particular instance, I've tried to give you an explanation of how the karmas that are required and that feeling of dukkhancha, of not liking the fact that you don't bathe as a monk, and what is considered to be important, why that acquired bad karmas that brought him down to life as a low caste person. Metarya's Dev friend and his behavior in ensuring that Metarya became a monk. He was very persistent and he was very steadfast, and he went as far as humiliating Metarya in front of the whole city. Now, that was an act of friendship, but some of us may feel, if you go deeper into the material aspects of the story, would feel that that was a terrible thing to do. So again, something to contemplate and look at why even that was considered to be the best thing, and Metarya was grateful for that. And then subsequently, Dev's agreement and the decision to help reverse what the king had decided and to help him marry the princess so that he could spend a few years as a householder and enjoy sensual pleasures. And the final question that I'd like you to think about, the jeweler's behavior with Metaraj Muni, as to what led him to that. I mean, the incident is described very briefly, but if you think about and imagine what would be going on in Metarya's mind as the monk and the Soni's mind, and how that level of spiritual elevation would enable him to actually sacrifice his life and suffer severe pain without breaking down or without losing his concentration and without regressing back to becoming upset and angry, and in fact in the process lose all his karmas and climb up so quickly and so fast. On the one hand, that was that behavior. On the other hand, you got a Sony who goes as far as completely ignoring the fact that what he was doing could kill the Muni, and becoming so greedy and so possessive about his wealth that he thought was lost, and was lost because the Muni had stolen it. And in that erroneous belief, he becomes so angry that he decides to go as far as he did, which resulted in Metaria's death. So again, this whole story is about these different aspects and what we need to learn from them. So I'll end here today. If you've been making notes, then please do this. Otherwise, I will send these 4 questions on the WhatsApp chat through Sandipai, so that you all have that. And we will start next week's class with some discussion following Sheila Ben's full recital of the Sajjai, and some discussion on these 4 comments, questions. And I'd like to hear what you all understand by this and how you make sense of this. I'll stop there. Okay. Thank you. Anybody wants to say anything very quickly? Not that we've got time to answer questions, but if there's something burning and you want to make a comment, please feel free. No? Okay. We'll end here. If I've said anything that is against the teachings of Jain Dharma or the great Tirthankars and Dev Guru, I ask for forgiveness. पितराज्ञां विरुद्ध जे काई पण बुलायो के वै विचारो ये ते सभी मनुष्यन काय करे तस्मिच्छामि दुक्कडम सर्वमंगल मांगल्यम सर्वकल्याण कारणम वदानम सर्वधर्माणम जैनम जयति शासनम. Thank you, Sheila Ben, for sharing your lovely voice with us. Thank you. Okay, that's the end of today's class.